Good afternoon and welcome to Crucible Chat. Yes, it's a Saturday. It's my prescribed day where I get to have a little bit of a rant about whatever the hell I want with the backdrop of a bit of Destiny Crucible action. Now, I hadn't thought of a kind of topic specifically for this week. I just kind of been generally irritated by a few things. Firstly, while doing this actual Crucible Chat episode, I noticed there are hardly any multiplayer maps in Destiny. I mean, what the hell is that about? This game being engineered with multiplayer at its heart, and it's got no fucking multiplayer maps. It's got one on every planet, and that's it. You know, there's one on Earth, one on the Moon, one on Venus, one on Mars. I think there's two on Mars. Yeah, there's two on Mars. But still, it's just like, come on, give us some more maps. I've got a distinct feeling we're going to have to pay for them when they come out. But anyway, that's besides the point. One of the points I did actually want to bring up, which is kind of, it's a really half-formed thought that I was thinking about last night, was there was a thing that came out the other day where Ubisoft has said for Assassin's Creed Unity, the PS4 version is going to be locked down to the same resolution as the Xbox One. Now, it's been widely discussed about the disparity between the Xbox One and the PS4 in regards to some things. I have no doubt that the Xbox One is a fine gaming machine in its own right, but the evidence stands that a lot of cross-platform games, the PS4 renders at always about 1080p, varying between 30 and 60 frames per second. But the Xbox One has always had to be limited down, or has had issues and has been scaled down to 900p, 30 frames a second. And I think it's one of these things, unless you're actually told that it's running at a lower resolution, I don't think you'd ever actually really notice it, because obviously it upscales to your TV. But the issue that I've got with this is that it just seems a little bit unfair to the PS4 players, because it's not the player's fault that the Xbox One, that the alternative that they didn't buy, doesn't run the game as well. And that just seems to me to be punishing PS4 players for no really good reason. But this isn't me getting butthurt. The thing that I wanted to bring up was that whenever a discussion about this comes out, and I've seen loads of discussions about this, you get two sides to an argument. You get the people who have the Xbox One who get annoyed by it. You get the PS4 players who jovially gloat a little bit, or in this case get really pissed off because PS4 players are being limited. And then you get the PC master race who insist on sticking their oar in and going, 60 frames a second, we can do 120 whatever 4K resolution. Shut up! I don't care! If I was a PC gamer, if I wanted to play games on a PC, I would buy a PC. But the point is, if there's an old joke. How do you know if a person's vegan? Don't worry, they'll fucking tell you. It's the same when it comes to PC players, I'm noticing at the minute. And this isn't to sound like kind of crass or again butthurt, but it seems like, no one is capable of a discussion anymore. Everyone seems to want to stick their oar in or wants to show off what they have. And it's like, that's great, you've spent £1,000 on a wonderfully wild PC that does all these things, but that doesn't improve gaming to me. To me, gaming is just a good game. I mean, my first play Friday yesterday was Spelunky. Now, that runs at 1080p at 60 frames a second on the PS4, and that's great, but it's a 2D primary colour platformer. It's not the most technically advanced game in the world, but it's an excellent game because of the way that it plays. And I think a lot of people have gotten lost in this, and it's only been kind of in this, maybe the last couple of years of the last console generation, and into this one, where people have actually started caring about resolutions and frame rates, because when it makes good media. When you're marketing something, you can put out that, hey, this runs at 1080p, 60 frames a second. People are impressed by that, despite the fact that I'm pretty sure a good chunk of the people who are impressed by it don't actually know what 1080p 60 FPS really relates to. And it's, I don't know, it just seems to be there is this strive for this golden nirvana of this frame rate and resolution combo, and people seem to be losing the fact that the games are supposed to entertain, not technically impress. I mean, don't get me wrong, good graphics are great. I love a game with good graphics. I mean, Destiny looks phenomenal. But if they scaled some of the textures back, I probably wouldn't notice. You know, if they scaled the resolution down to 900p, I probably wouldn't notice. And that is the point, that the focusing in the marketing on these facts, on these little figures and statistics, that people really, really shouldn't care about unless you're actually making the game. I mean, you don't see filmmakers, with the exception of Peter Jackson, going, "Oh, we should do a film in 60 frames a second because it looks slicker." So what? Films have been 24 or 30 frames a second for 90 odd years, or however long you want to talk about the moving picture. I mean, it's a picture that moves. That's all there is. 60 frames a second. 60 frames a second for... I should probably explain it. So that's literally what it is. The human eye sees a couple of hundred, the equivalent of a couple of hundred frames a second. But the illusion of smooth motion can happen as low as 24 frames a second, which is what television and films tend to be put in, just on the... because back in the days of film, you know, limited amounts of film. So when you get 24 frames a second, you get a moving image. A smooth moving image, rather. One where you wouldn't notice the change in frames. Now, games have traditionally been always around about 30 frames a second. Just, you know, it's a perfectly smooth move. Recently, games have been pushing 60 Hz or 60 frames a second to try and give a very fast, very slick image. You would notice this if you, say, played Call of Duty on the last generation, because they were all 720p, 60 frames a second. Now, the 1080 or the 720, that's referring to the pixel density on the screen. So it's, what is it? 1080p is 1080 vertical lines of pixels on the screen. 720 is 720. No, not vertical, horizontal. Yes, because 1080p is 1920 by 1080. So that's 1920 horizontal lines of pixels and 1080 vertical. Fucking hell, man! 1920 running left to right, 1080 running top to bottom. There we go. God, I'm really, really tired. Can't believe I did that. But yeah, so that's what people are getting so in a spin about. And you know what? Life goes on. There is nothing less important. Unless you are actually making a game and you are worried about performance, as in you are the performance test lead on a game, you do not need to worry about pixels. You do not need to worry about frames per second. You need to worry about frames per second if it drops below 30, because then you start having issues. I think the biggest one, which anybody who's played games in the last 5 years will have pointed out, was Blighttown and Dark Souls. And when you played it on either of the console versions, the Xbox 360 or the PS3 version, you went into Blighttown and the artwork is fantastic, the place looks amazing, but there is so much for the console to render that the performance really takes a hit, and your frame rate drops down to really low figures. Like sometimes, I think the lowest I kind of worked out was maybe about 12 frames per second for me. Which, when you're in a really twitchy, reaction-driven game like Dark Souls that involves tactics and precise timing, having your frames dropping like that is the worst possible thing you could have for the game. So, I mean, conversely, when you get to Dark Souls 2, that runs at 720p and 60 frames a second on the PS3. I don't know what it runs on the Xbox. I haven't played it on the Xbox. And obviously on the PC you can achieve much higher because you can just set the custom settings. But 60 frames a second, it is smooth. It is fast. You can swing the camera around quickly. And that is what a lot of people want in a first-person shooter game. Now, when it comes to the actual screen size, that shouldn't matter because your telly will automatically scale it up. As long as it's a widescreen image, your telly should scale it up perfectly fine. So you shouldn't care whether it's 900p or not, and it shouldn't be an issue for anybody. And the point is, it shouldn't be a marketing thing. I know that Sony came out when the PS4 was released, when it was revealed that the Xbox One was not going to be as powerful. So Sony came out with all these promises of constant 1080p, 60 frames a second, all that shite. And yes, the PS4 is a more powerful console, but it's really much of a muchness. I mean, I've seen Destiny running on an Xbox One, and it looks no different to how I see it on my PS4. You know, it just doesn't make sense like that. But you know what? This is a really badly formed argument because I'm just kind of rolling around on myself. Because then, you know, I can talk about that and talk about how there is parity between them, but then Alien Isolation, which I've been playing on the PS4, looks phenomenal, and I've watched a couple of videos of people playing it on Xbox One, and the frame rate is low, it stutters, it jerks, and it doesn't seem like as good an experience. So then it begs the question, and I think this is the overall point I'm shambling towards: whose fault is it? Is it Microsoft's for putting a console out where they focus too much on the extra stuff that the OS can do, like all the media stuff and the Skype calls and the snapping picture-in-picture kind of shit? Or is it the developers for not being able to develop effectively for the Xbox One? Now, all the promises were made with this generation that it would be easier to develop for these two consoles so that you would get a more PC-like experience. If you remember the last generation, if you got cross-platform games, they were almost always better on the Xbox 360 because... And developers came out and said this: the PS3 was an absolute pain in the arse to code for. Whereas it seems to be reversed this time round. Developing on the PS4 seems to be a lot easier, or at least developers find it more comfortable than on the Xbox One. Now, and then of course you get Microsoft admitting that they made a cock-up, and then unbundling the Kinect and releasing the system kit update, which allows developers to tap into that extra power that the Kinect holds, because the Kinect was taking something like 10% of the available processing power. And, you know, you need headroom, so developers could be running up to 90% of what the console could do, but then have this 10% reserved for the Kinect, which most of the time was idle because there aren't that many games that make use of it. So, you know, they lose that headroom there, that availability in case they need to spike something, so then you would get frame rate drops. And it's a hard one. It's a hard question to answer, and I'm not really sure how to answer it, because one of the things that put me off the Xbox One, I mean, I was a PS3 player before this generation came out, so I was probably always likely to get a PS4. But one of the things that put me off specifically about the Xbox One was that when it was announced, they made all this ballyhoo about all this media shit. You know, you get Major League Baseball on it, you get Netflix on it, you could put your Skybox through it, and the Xbox could control the Skybox, and all this extra shit that had nothing to do with the games. And all I wanted to know from the Xbox is what the games were going to be like. You know, was there going to be a new Halo? Was there going to be a new Dead Rising? That kind of thing. What were the exclusives? What were the big games coming out for the Xbox One? And they spent most of the time talking about all the fucking dashboard shit that you can do with it. And that annoyed me. I mean, it annoyed me on the 360 when they did the Metro UI, when they made it look like Windows 8. And then they hid games out the way. You know, on the dashboard, you used to be able to go in and what was in your disc tray was there, and you could see games. And if you wanted to go and look for media, you had to scroll up or scroll left or whatever it was to get to the media. But then they released this Metro UI and fucked all that up. You know, games were moved to the side, media was up there, subscribe to Xbox Live, all this kind of shit. Anyway, I'm getting away from the point here because I'm getting annoyed. I can keep seeing me red light clip here on my microphone as well, so I can tell I'm getting very raggy. So in fact, you know, I'm going to open this up to you. If you've made it this far of this shambling rant that it is, let me know. What do you think? Do you think that the fact that we have this parity between the Xbox One, disparity between the Xbox One and the PS4, is this because of the developers not being able to code for it, or Microsoft for making a bad console? I mean, the sales figures themselves do kind of speak volumes. You know, the PS4 is wildly outselling the Xbox One. Hell, even the Wii U is outselling the Xbox One in some areas. But is it a sign that the PS4 has already won this particular games console war? You know, are Microsoft likely to refresh the Xbox a lot sooner than the PS4? Or is the Xbox One kind of going to be like an interim product? Or are they just going to give up on it and make a backwards compatible Xbox 2 in the next couple of years? Or, you know, is it just going to be the case of that the Xbox One was a massive failure and Microsoft will just have to roll with that?
You neutralized Zone B.
Let me know in the comments and you tell me what you think. Because you know what, I can't really come to a clear decision on it, and this has been just a really kind of pithy rant, but I can tell you this one thing for sure. When it comes to Assassin's Creed Unity, I do have a pre-order. I was going to cover it on my channel, but then I think if I'm going to be getting a lesser product because of the Xbox One version, I'm a bit in two minds about whether to buy it or not. I mean, I've been in two minds whether to buy it or not anyway. But I'm thinking, you know what, this month has been really great for games. I'm loving Alien Isolation at the minute. But then I'm thinking The Evil Within comes out next week. The Shadow of Mordor, which I'm not sure whether to put on my channel or not. But that's another point. I'm just thinking, is another Assassin's Creed game going to be worth my time and effort to play? Or is it worthwhile me buying something new? I mean, bear in mind that Destiny, Alien Isolation have both been brand new IPs, and I've loved these games, and they're doing really well on my channel. I'm getting good views on it, and thank everyone who's viewing them. So the point that I would make is Unity is like the 9th Assassin's Creed game or something like that.
Heavy ammo available.
Is it going to be wildly different? Is it going to be good? Is it worth my while spending 45 of my hard-earned pounds on it to basically show it on this channel? Answers on the postcard are in the comments section. I'm going to wrap this little rant up now. This is a very ranty episode. I'm very sorry about that, but I had to get these random little colluded thoughts out of my head. Please, thank you everyone who is watching and who is liking and subscribing. Just carry on doing what you're doing. You mean the world to me. Come back next week for another Crucible chat. Come back for more Alien Isolation. And I think by now we should be getting to the end of my Destiny playthrough as well, so there'll be the end of Destiny 2. So, but for now, thank you and good night.